Awesome. Thank you guys for being here. My name is Colton Dillion. I'm the CTO at Hedgehog, hedgehog.app, and today I'm here today to talk to you about how to compare protocols, because we live in a multi-chain world and it's only going to get more multi-chain. A little bit about Hedgehog. We're a cryptocurrency robo-advisor, and our goal is to connect to every custodian and protocol to help you trade at the best possible price automatically. We just got registered with the SEC last year. Our goal is to help clients have custodial and non-custodial wallets and to automate their interactions with the chain for them and to connect them with best execution across CeFi and DeFi. So the original question for all these protocols, right, is how do you prevent counterfeiting? That's the baseline question. And if we go back to 1982, we sort of have the Byzantine general's problem with Leslie Lamport, where he says, you know, as long as we have 2/3 of people who are telling the truth, we can catch liars. And so that's one of our first approaches, is Byzantine fault tolerance. We have Ripple, we have Stellars, we have Tendermint on Cosmos. All of these are BFT protocols that offer this 2/3 guarantee. And so as we see people getting closer to having 1/3 of individuals in the network trying to collude, to lie, we lose some of those guarantees. And that's really the benefit of Nakamoto Consensus, is we take that 2/3 requirement down to 51%. So in 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto releases a paper, and he says, if we can put together a timestamp server, create a chain of digital signatures, and then take those signatures and put them into a Merkle proof, and then apply some proof of work, require a certain number of 0 bits on the front of each block hash. And then if we take the longest chain that has the longest number of zeros in front of it, then we can catch liars, as long as 51% of people are colluding. But the thing is this is probabilistic, right? If it's only a 1 in 1,000 chance that we will catch a double spend across 5 blocks if we believe that 10% of people are colluding. If 45% of people are colluding, we have to wait 2 days, right? So this is the actual guarantee of the protocol. And then we added smart contracts onto it. In 2014, Vitalik releases the Ethereum paper. He creates a state machine. Instead of unspent transaction outputs, now we have accounts that are connected to transactions that reveal state with every block. And this allows us to create Ricardian contracts, which were created in 1998 by Ian Grigg, and gives us all of the beautiful variety of colored coins that we have today. But it creates a very complex ecosystem, and again, each of these protocols have a certain set of guarantees. Which has required us to move to proof of stake in order to increase our transaction throughput and increase the usability of the system. So here we have epics, we have validators, we have staking and slashing. What does that mean? We all put currency into a big basket, and then we have people checking the chain constantly to make sure that people are telling the truth. And if we find someone who lied, then we can slash their stake, burn what they anteed up. And what are the guarantees here, right? As long as we have 111 validators, we have a 2 to the -40 chance that we will miss one of these colluding actors, or that colluding actors will be grouped into the same committee. And so we have to realize that, again, this is a probabilistic estimate, but it allows us to bring that requirement of honest actors down to 1/3. So we're getting better and better over time. And again, in order to make these transactions occur faster, now we're adding these layers of sharding on top of it. So now there are these additional guarantees that you have to take into account as you move into layer 2. So we have sort of these 4 different models right now. We have state channels and validiums, we have roll-ups of the ZK variety and the optimistic variety, and we have plasmas. And basically this exists on a continuum from on-chain validation to off-chain validation, right? Who are you trusting in a state channel? You're trusting the person who's taking the money off the chain and who's guaranteeing that all of the transactions that occur in their state channel are going to go back on-chain. For the plasma, you are trusting all of the side chains and hoping that somebody will catch a liar before your money disappears. For roll-ups, all of it occurs on-chain, and it exists on a continuum of validation to challenging. So is it pull, where we validate all the transactions as they come in, or do we require somebody to go find the liar, and so it's push in that way? So what are the guarantees of the sharding protocol, right? In channels, you have instant withdrawal, but you have to trust somebody. For Plasma, you don't have to have that trust necessarily, but somebody has to go find the liars. And so you have 7 days to find that liar when you want to withdraw. For ZK rollups, you get the instant withdrawals, but you have a higher cost associated with that because of the proof generations. So that brings us to sort of another paradigm besides Nakamoto Consensus, where we look at acyclic directed graphs. All of the previous sort of protocols we've talked about require consensus blocks. Everything has to happen synchronously in time with each other. And so the idea is if we move to ADGs, now we don't have to do this at the same time. We can be asynchronous. So if you look at IOTA's tangle or hash graph, these things allow you to have these sort of asynchronous events, and you only have to track your transactions and the transactions of a couple of your neighbors. And as long as the number of transactions is really large, then the odds that we can find a valid random path back to the root increases exponentially in favor of validators and against colluders. So, you know, the guarantees here are you have to start kind of centralized because there aren't a lot of transactions that exist in the early days. But as the protocol gets larger and larger, you can progressively decentralize and still regain a lot of the guarantees of the acyclic directed graph. And then, of course, in all of these protocols, you can layer anonymity on top of it because privacy becomes really important. So you have CryptoNote with ring signatures in Monero. You have ZK Starks and ZK Snarks, which use algorithmic circuits. And you have Mimblewimble that uses Peterson commitments and homomorphic encryption to obfuscate past transactions. But each of these have slightly separate guarantees around the anonymity, right? So Monero has this anonymity set where you don't know if you or 11 other transactors actually made the transaction, and you can continuously produce new addresses. Zcash, if you ever make a public address, then you know that, a public transaction, that address is burned. Now you have to get back into the anonymity set because you've removed yourself from it. For Mimblewimble, anything in the past is visible for unspent transaction outputs that aren't currently being spent, but the currently spent unspent transaction outputs are anonymous. And so these are very specific guarantees, and you should be aware of them before using any of the protocols. Be aware of the underlying assumptions is the key takeaway. And so how can we create a model to go through each of these considerations when you're considering a new protocol? And today I'm going to propose that we should look at identity, privacy, the verification model, liquidity, the administration, the composability of the underlying primitives, the interactivity, how easy is it to use, and the persistence of the chain. So what do I mean when I say identity? Right? In the existing paradigm, we have social identity. You get a passport, social security number, you can change your name. This is social identity. In crypto, you have your seed phrase. You have your 256-bit entropy. You have your elliptic curves you can generate from that entropy. And then you can hang proof of humanity or bright ID or ENS or any other identifier on that elliptic curve. But you also have capital identity. What do you own? What are the how do we know that an NFT belongs to you or that the transaction belongs to you? In the existing paradigm, we have checks, serial numbers on cash, credit cards. And you know, in the cryptocurrency paradigms we consider today, we have unspent transaction outputs, state machines, and then various block validation paradigms, right? If a chain forks, then you briefly duplicate the identity of all the transactions. So it's really important about how you resolve those disputes about identity with, for example, orphan blocks, uncle blocks in Ethereum, or stale blocks. So the questions are, with what probability can the protocol prevent cloning of social or capital identities? How are identity conflicts resolved and over what time frame? Can cloned identities control additional protocol decision power? And can identities be recovered if they're lost or compromised? Which brings us to privacy, right? So now we have identity, but what about bribery or threats? How can we evade people trying to steal our votes or trying to threaten us for the things that we have? So again, we have the privacy models. We can layer anonymity on top of it, which several ZK solutions are coming out on Ethereum. But you also have to be aware of the network topology, right? It's possible to de-anonymize people by the way that the protocol interacts and the way that computers communicate with each other. So Dandelion protocol is an attempt to try and mitigate some of these network topology attacks. The questions that it begs is, how well does the protocol prevent threats and bribes? Can privacy be recovered if an identity is de-anonymized? And does the protocol admit alternative attacks like network analysis? Which brings us to sort of the reverse side of privacy, right? If you can be private, how can we verify you are who you say you are, or that you did what you said you did? So each protocol has a cost to verify, right? How much of the blockchain history do I have to store to really understand whether you did something or not? Or what's the information that I have to include in the block in order to fully describe the actions that you took on chain or who you are? What are the inputs to verify? How much do I have to know about you, or do I have to know about what you're trying to accomplish in order to allow you to do that thing? Again, this is where sort of zero knowledge and computational integrity proofs come into play. Is it a push or pull system? Do I have to go find bad actors and punish them? Or is it a part of the protocol that we can't actually create of an invalid transaction? So what are the data and compute requirements for validation? What are the guarantees around the checkpoint data? How much about the inputs and outputs must the validator be aware? Is validation queued in a push or a pull model? What's the probability of catching a liar? Because again, this is all probabilistic. Which brings us to liquidity, right? How do I get into a chain or out of a chain? What are the pairs that are available for me to get from US dollar to Nano, or from Nano to OMI's Go, right? The ease with which I can get in and out is really important. The transaction throughput, how well the underlying token maintains its value and can be traded for value. What's the velocity of the money? How often do people actually spend it? And do they generate transaction fees for the miners and create an ecosystem that people want to participate in? What's the net issuance per day, right? Ethereum just did 1559 for the burn protocol, and that's completely changed the dynamics of Ethereum as a protocol. How easy is it to get from one protocol token to any other? How well does the protocol token maintain value in relation to others? How easy is it to send and accept the token on the underlying protocol? And what is the issuance model? Will people accept that token as payment for goods? Which leads us to administration, right? Not everything can be on-chain. There is the Oracle problem. There are some things that we just can't put inside the protocol. And so you have to have a method for resolving those disputes and bringing things on-chain or dealing with things that happen off-chain. In the United States, we have the Federal Reserve Board and the Open Market Committee, and they create all of these policies in order to shape the economy. But obviously now in Ethereum, we have DAOs. We have governance built into Tezos at the protocol layer. And we can sort of compose these voting paradigms with these treasury management paradigms. But the question is, how is power distributed across those paradigms, right? Is it $1, one vote, where the more tokens I have, the more voting power I have? Or is it one person, one vote, where I have to have proof of humanity, and this gives me voting power? Or is it some combination of the two? The important bit this leads to is, what are the guarantees of the dispute resolution process? How are all the market participants incensed to cooperate? How is the protocol control distributed to participants? And how long can the administration of that protocol be deadlocked? And then we have composability. So we have all of these primitives. Can we put them together to do really cool things? There's vertical composition. In the case of Polkadot, you have substrate where you can take all of these layers of the data layer, the network layer, the consensus layer, and you can put them together into your own sidechain, your own parachain. You have horizontal composition, where you're trying to make work happen across protocols using bridges or using your own contracts and a centralized party. Or there's depth composition, just chaining contracts together within the same protocol. And what kinds of useful things can you do there? So how easily can you stack vertical, horizontal, and depth composition? And how easy is it to shoot yourself in the foot by doing that? Which leads us to interactivity, right? How easy is it to use, right? We have ledgers, public keys, private keys. There's on-ramps, but nobody knows which ones to use. There's a whole ecosystem of wallets out there. But we've only really reached a fifth of Americans with cryptocurrency. If you go by Coinbase accounts, not much to say of DeFi accounts, right? So how do we make this easier to use? And how do we make it easier for developers to get onboarded? What is the community like? What's the dev activity on the protocol? How many active users are there? What's the transaction volume? These are all important aspects of the health, and it's all public because they're distributed ledgers. So you should really check these things before you build on them or before you partake in the protocol. So it begs questions: how easy is it to get started? How much support is there for new entrants? What's the cost of ongoing participation? How active is the community generally? And is there interoperability with other communities? Which leads us to our final criterion: persistence. How long has it been around, right? Has it forked? How has it existed past other forks? Do those forks have claim to the mining power, and can they attack the main fork, or vice versa, where the main fork can attack the children forks? These are important considerations because you don't want to get 51% attacked because there was a community dispute. So it begs the questions, how long has the protocol been around? Has it survived divisive conflict in the community? How many forks exist, and can the miners on those forks attack the canonical protocol? And do I expect it to be around in the future? And so the real question is, how can we abstract away this complexity, right? As developers, as users, as people creating the ecosystem. And that's exactly what we're trying to do at Hedgehog. So if you want to try and tackle these problems with us, I encourage you to approach me after the talk, and I open it up to questions.